Welcome, I'm Todd Robbins, October 1st, the 1st of October, and a number of, well, truly twisted things happen on this day. Here's just a handful of them, starting off in 1864. A cyclone hits Calcutta, and 70,000 people are killed, because that's what happens when a cyclone hits a place like Calcutta. On this day in 1867, Karl Marx, no relation to the Marx Brothers, but just as disruptive, I don't know. He published on this day his book Das Kapital, came out, yeah. And there goes the neighborhood. 1890, Congress establishes the Yosemite National Park in California in 1890, and this was a lovely thing. It was recently renamed Yosemite. In 1898, Jews are expelled from Kiev in the Ukraine for being Jews. And also on this day, Tsar Nikolai II expels Jews from major cities in Russia. Just seemed like the thing to do on this day, I guess. 1919, the infamous Black Sox Baseball World Series begins. This was the World Series in which 8 members of the White Sox, Chicago White Sox, took bribes to throw the World Series because they're heavily favored. And they did. And the end result was that thereafter, when they became known that this bribery happened and the series was thrown, they became known that year's team as the Black Sox. And sure enough, they ended up losing. White Sox lost to Cincinnati Reds 9-1. In 1934, Adolf Hitler expands the German Army and Navy. This was a complete violation of the Treaty of Versailles. He didn't care. 1939, Winston Churchill, a very famous quote. A lot of people know the quote. They don't know it came from Winston Churchill, the great English statesman. And it is, he said, it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside of an enigma. A riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. What he was referring to? Russia. Nothing has changed. 1946, 12 Nazi war criminals are sentenced to death in Nuremberg. It was a day of justice after all they had done. And on this day, in 1948, the California Supreme Court voids the state statute on banning interracial marriages. It's about time. In 1949, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, revolutionist in China, he designates the country, the new country after the revolution, he designates it the People's Republic of China. It became a thing on this day in 1949. Also, in 1949, the Republic of China forms on the island of Formosa. We now know it as Taiwan. In 1957, the B-52 bombers begin a full-time flying aerial alert. On this day, basically, B-52 bombers took off. And there was always a bomber in the air, maybe more than one, but there was always one in the air with nuclear warheads in case the command centers were blown out by the Russians. And it didn't stop this continuous flying until I think 1992. All those years, there were bombers in the air just in case. 1957, also on this day, it's the first appearance of "In God We Trust" on a U.S. currency. Up to that time, there was no "In God We Trust." It was also about the same time that it was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. The reason was there was a Red Scare. We were deathly afraid of the Soviet Union. And this was used by the evangelical right to further their agenda, which was to get rid of the separation of church and state as much as possible. So they convinced that one of the main tenets of communist Russia and China was that there was no God, and that we were a God-fearing country. And so the powers that be were convinced that we should put "In God We Trust," which is, don't get me started on this. It is such, it's not a good thing. Moving right along, 1968, "In This I Do Trust," a film premieres in Pittsburgh, of all places. Yes, Pittsburgh, that hotbed of cinema, taste, and influence. And what is the film? It is little George A. Romero film called The Night of the Living Dead. It made zombies a thing on this date in 1968, 1974. Another stellar. It's a cheap, not a cheap film, but an inexpensive film, and yet it is very disturbing. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre premiered in Austin, Texas on this day in 1974. Tobe Hooper, there you go. And 1996, following the Port Arthur Massacre, John Howard's Australian government starts a gun buyback program, and it requires the turning in of more than 640,000 firearms, including many automatic weapons and illegal weapons. These were turned in and bought back by the government, and has had a wonderful effect on things down under. What a novel idea. Too bad it can't be tried elsewhere. 2012, California becomes the first U.S. state to ban conversion therapy for minors. You know conversion therapy. If you're gay, well, we can get it out of you by tormenting and torturing you. Sure. That sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Well, California didn't think so. And so for children under the age of consent, under the age, children in the minority years, minors that is, you couldn't do it on them. It's not a bad thing. I mean, this ban is not a bad thing. 2015, it was one of those bloody days. We have those every once in a while. A bunch of bad things happened on that day, on this day in that year. Let's put it that way. A gunman kills 8 students and teachers at the Umpqua Community Center in Roseburg, Oregon. Mudslides on the outskirts of Guatemala City leaves at least 131 dead and 300 missing. A cargo ship, El Faro, goes missing during a hurricane in the Bahamas, and 33 people, crew members, were lost. In 2017, the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States so far happened. It happened in Las Vegas. A fellow by the name of Stephen Paddock, for whatever reason, got a hotel room in Las Vegas across the street from where a big outdoor music festival was happening. He kicked out the window. I believe it was the Mandalay Bay hotel, and he had brought with him a bunch of high-powered automatic weapons and used those to shoot down people across the street. Death toll, 58 people dead and 489 injured. 2019, the Indian government bans the export of onions. There is a shortage of onions, and so it bans the export of onions to control the prices, keeps the price down, and it causes shortages in Bangladesh and Nepal. But it was nothing to cry over. See what I did there? Onions. You cut in. Moving right along. People will be looking back upon this, what happened on this day in 2019, and scratching their heads. There are many times in the past you read about laws that were passed and ideas that were floated, and you go, why? What? And this is one of them, I guarantee you, even though it only happened a year ago. A law allowing teachers to carry guns in schools comes into effect in Florida. No good can come of that. 2019, a former Dallas police officer, Amber Geiger, is found guilty of murdering her black neighbor in his apartment, and is a landmark case in the use of police force and racial bias. So there you go. Also, yeah, that was a strange case, very, very strange. A lot of unanswered questions about that. Let's jump back to 1825. And again, this is one of those days when many strange confluence of birthdays of people that later went on to become generals in the Civil War on both sides. For some reason, on this day, as we've had other days, they cluster up, not on the same year, but throughout the years, but on this day. It's curious. You would think they'd be all spread out, but for some reason they line up on certain days. And this is one of them. 1825, Raleigh Edward Colston, who was a brigadier general for the Confederate Army. 1830, Jeremiah Cutler Sullivan, brigadier general for the Union Army. And 1831, Claudius Charles Wilson, brigadier general for the Confederate Army. 1832, Caroline Harrison. Never mind. No, she was born on this day, but that has nothing to do with anything. Well, she was the first lady under Benjamin Harrison, but that's just creeped in here for no good reason whatsoever. I'm sure she had darkness inside of her, no doubt. I mean, she was the first lady. They're always suspect, but sus. They're sus. But I really don't have any dirt on her. But however, Francis Cockrell was born on this day in 1834. He became an American brigadier general for the Confederate Army. 1835, Roger H. Anderson, brigadier general for the Confederate Army. Also in 1835, William Hicks Jackson, better known as Red Jackson. William Hicks Red Jackson, brigadier general in the Confederate Army, born 1835. And there is another birthday years later. A couple of birthdays of interesting, one birthday of an interesting woman and a death of an interesting woman. Bonnie Parker was born on this day in 1910. Bonnie of Bonnie and Clyde. You know, she hooked up with Clyde, and the two of them went on a killing and crime spree and became sort of almost folk heroes back in the early 1930s. And on this day, she was born, and she died in 1934 in a hail of bullets, as they say. And finally, in 1864 was the death of a remarkable woman, a very dark woman. This was Rose Greenhow. She was a socialite in Washington, D.C. She was originally from the South. And when the Civil War broke out, she became a spy for the Confederacy because of her prominence in the social world, knowing the president, senators, military leaders, and she was just a woman after all, and second-class citizen. She heard things that she ended up funneling to the Confederacy, and it helped the Confederacy greatly, including letting them know about some troop movement in Northern Virginia that set up the first Battle of Manassas, the first Battle of Bull Run, which was the first big battle of the Civil War and a major victory for the Confederacy. It was a wake-up call to the North that this was not going to be a lark, this Civil War. And the loss of life was something like 3,000 soldiers. And it was because of this woman. She ended up being caught. I think she either escaped or was deported to the South, and she continued her activities there, including being on a ship running the blockade that the Union Navy had set up, and going to Europe, specifically England and France, advocating, sort of an unofficial ambassador for the Confederacy, trying to get them to support the South in their efforts in order to harm the North. On her way back, her ship was, I believe it was captured, and she ended up, or shipwrecked or something like that, and she ended up in a boat, a rowboat, trying to get to shore, and it capsized and she died. And that was her demise. A fascinating woman. It would be interesting. I don't know how you would spin it to make it positive, but she is the kind of woman that you almost want to see a thrilling movie about. Well, there you go, and there you have it. So much for this day. I hope you enjoyed this video, because I do this video for you, and you know who you are. And if you did enjoy the video, hit the like button. Also, hit the subscribe, so you'll be, you can take part in all the wonderful things that are coming onto this channel. And by that same token, hit the notification so you're alerted to what's coming down the pike here. And I hope to see you back here tomorrow, assuming you survive all the sinister things that'll be happening to you on this day. And if you do survive, see you tomorrow, maybe, yes. And if you don't survive, well, do me a favor if you would. If you have the opportunity, as you're dying and your life is ebbing from you, if there's someone there, just it would pleasure me mightily if you would look at them and say, you know, Todd Robbins knows, just ask him. And then close your eyes and drift off. Always keep them guessing. That's what I recommend, because I am Todd Robbins. And in regards to all the things happening on this day, well, good luck.